So I feel like I might end up doing
Okay.
that. So like somebody knock on the table if I'm doing it excessively. So. Okay, so are you ready with the camera? All right, then I'm gonna start. My speech is titled "Stop the Criminalization of Drug Addiction." I think a better title would be that the war on drugs is actually a war on humanity, in my opinion. There's over 17 million drug abusers or drug users in this country, and one of the biggest fears related, besides the obvious health concerns, is legal concerns. And the war on drugs hasn't been around, forever. We did have a prohibition on alcohol, and that too was also a politically motivated issue. So I'm sure most of you have heard of the slogan, "America's War on Drugs." It's pretty well marketed. Unfortunately, their plan is not as well executed as their marketing strategies. So in doing my research, that's the biggest thing that I noticed is tons and tons of money are contributed to the war on drugs. And the end result is this is a war that's never ending, basically. So billions of dollars, no result. Capitalism on its best. Okay, so specifically the three issues that I'm going to talk about today are the fact that the war on drugs is very costly and politically motivated, that it treats the victim of an illness as a perpetrator of a crime, and that it's self-perpetuating, so the cycle just continues and there is no end in sight. So with that, I'll get started. My first main point is that the war on drugs is a political issue. It's an economic issue, it's a race issue, and it perpetuates stereotypes in our country as well as costing billions of dollars. And I did put money spent on war on drugs this year up here. The total is over $44 billion. And it's not working. It's a lot of money to spend on something that isn't working. And not only that, but a large majority of blacks and Hispanics that are incarcerated for drug-related crimes outweigh the amount of white criminals that are incarcerated. And one thing that you may have seen as an example of that is a lot of attention is paid to crack addiction as opposed to powdered cocaine addiction. They're the same drug, derived from the same drug, but one is an urban population, largely African American that use it, and the other is suburban white. Not necessarily, black and white issue, but largely this is distributed racially. And so there's profiling and poverty issues that are perpetuated as a result of this as well. So a viable alternative to making this a political issue is making it a public health issue. And why we haven't done that, I don't know. But regardless, I think it's important to point out that drug addiction actually is an illness. It's not something that comes from a character flaw or comes from, a politically motivated issue. So one of the biggest issues with the war on drugs is that it prevents drug addicts from actually getting treatment. So when you are punishing people rather than treating them, there's no hope to stop the cycle. It continues. Sorry. Okay, so according to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, 1/2 to 2/3 of inmates in jails and state and federal prisons, they meet the standard for the alcohol and drug dependency according to the DSM-4. With that said, only 7 to 17% of these people are actually treated. So the population and the difference to being treated is huge. And then what ends up happening is that about 650,000 of those inmates who are released from prison have the same problems, and then the cycle continues because they end up back in jail. So there was a little bit of research done. Actually, there's a lot of research done. A little bit of my research on the research was done by Dr. Simpson, and he's at the Institute of Behavioral Research at Texas Christian University. And he did some research on several studies that were done in 1999, and what those showed was that Actually, prisoners do very well if given treatment for drug addiction. Their recidivism rate is down to 1/4, so only 1/4 of the people who have received treatment will go back, as opposed to 3/4 who don't receive treatment, ending back up in the prison system. And then I just had a few figures on the amount of people who are actually in jail. Arrests for drug violations in 2009 are expected to increase, and as of today, this is according to a really great website called Drug War, I think it's called War on Drugs or something. Now I can't even remember, that's awful. warondrugs.com, I believe. So over 1 million today. No, this year, sorry, this year, were arrested for drugs, and then 9,000 are actually incarcerated for drugs. And about 25% are sentenced for drug law violations. The one problem I saw in the research was that there wasn't a lot that actually sifted out what was a drug addict and what was just a simple drug offense. And I think that would be an important part for the future going forward. Okay then, back to my task. I'm doing really bad with this speech. Okay, so it is a self-perpetuating problem, and that's one of the worst parts of the war on drugs. So not only is that politically motivated and treating illness as a crime, but it also self-perpetuates. So taxpayers are paying over $35 billion, according to some resources, to tackle this issue with no result. And research suggests that addicts do fare better with treatment, not punishment. So what ends up happening is we're paying twice for the same thing. We're paying for the addict to be in jail, which is roughly $36,000 a year per inmate, and then we're also paying for the obvious medical problems that are going to come from it. You have the humane issues of, is withdrawal in a cell actually humane? Throw somebody in there, have them go through chemical withdrawal. It's an ugly thing no matter what drug a person is on. So those are some of the issues that come up when we're looking at the war on drugs. It's not a simple black and white issue, but definitely something that we should be thinking about and hope to solve. So in conclusion, I just want you to realize that we are a society that is capable of solving problems, definitely. We don't want to just leave it up to the government, because this is what ends up happening. So we can't let others tell us how to feel. When you stop thinking about a problem, it is usually because you have stopped feeling bad about it. And as you leave here today, I'd like you to feel bad for the over 36,000 seriously ill men and women who are being punished right now instead of treated. Thank you. Oh, that was awful. I couldn't stop breathing.